to protect people. And one other thing that I should add to this point about protecting minority races. In Georgia, we were just talking about the Lion of Atlanta. In Atlanta, white people are an ethnic minority. So, and nobody says, oh, we need laws to protect white people in Atlanta.
Welcome, everybody, to the Great Object Podcast. This will be episode 7 called Dio Vindice, which means God will protect us. That was the original Latin phrase that the Confederate States of America used as their logo and motto. And I have an extremely exciting panel for you guys today. Not only do I have a world-renowned author and law professor, I have 2 of the most active voices in the Confederate circle on Twitter. Today, you will not be receiving revisionism history. Today, you will be receiving strictly what we all know to be true. You will be receiving a education in what actually happened as opposed to what you have been taught and brainwashed for 160 years about. Normally, I would not put together a panel like this where everybody kind of agrees, but we've all heard the other side of the story already. We've had it told us to us our entire life. So today, I'm just going to introduce these guys one at a time. Let's see. I have Dixie Cavalier. He is a graduate of George Mason University. He is majored in government, international politics, with a focus on philosophy and government. He was born and raised in Virginia, and he's a proud descendant of a long line of Southern patriots stretching back all the way to Jamestown. He is a 5th great-grandson of a Red Revolutionary hero, John Camp Charter, and was captured by the British at Waxhaws. I have Nate. He is our third guest. Born and raised in Arkansas, he is the face of Confederate youth and the future of Confederate advocacy, and I think a value contributor to the Confederate resurgence we're seeing today in the post-censorship era. And our special guest for today is Dr. Wanjiru Njoya from the Mises Institute, and she has, let's see, I've got show notes here. I'm sorry. So she is the Walter E. Williams Research Fellow of the Mises Institute. She has earned her PhD in law from the University of Cambridge. She's taught law for over 20 years in the highest institutions in the world, from Cambridge University to the London School of Economics, University of Exeter, the Queen's University of Canada. You can catch her many talks and lectures with the Mises Institute website and the YouTube channel. She is the author of Economic Freedom and the Social Justice, the classic ideal of equality in context of racial diversity in 2021, as well as Redressing Historical Injustice at Palgrave Macmillan 2023 with David Gordon, and Reconstruction Reconsidered, which is also a talk given with the Mises Institute channel and website. How are you, Dr. Njoya?
Great, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on your show. It's so great to be here, especially today we're remembering the day that Virginia seceded.
Yes,
Right,
it's
very
it's
special.
amazing how the scheduling worked out on that, because I was originally shooting for Memorial Day, and then I was like, "Wait, that's so cool." But yeah, so, like, I just wanted to, point out, normally I wouldn't put together a show like this where we all agree, 'cause I really do enjoy a balanced, conversation, but we've all been censored for so long about, like, if we're trying to defend our ancestors and show that they weren't evil. Most of them didn't even know why the war was going on at the time. So, what we'll do, I guess, is I'll just do my introductory segment, and then we'll just kind of go from whatever speaking order you guys feel like going in. And then after that, we'll just relax into a more general, like, banter conversation, as well as pulling up things from the chat. Both the edited and the live version will both be worth your time for the audience, because in the edited version, what we're going to do is, because of the subject matter, we're going to make sure each and every one of us are answering your questions in the chat, and we're going to have sources on the screen as well as pictures and everything else. So what I usually like to focus on when I'm talking about war history is what's called Thucydides' trap. Thucydides is an ancient Greek philosopher and economics thinker. He predicted the Peloponnesian War by about 100 years. In doing so, he he predicted every war that would ever happen from that point on, because he showed that every war that has ever been fought was fought for economic reasons, and then they try to sell it through propaganda. And because when you try to say, hey, I'm wanting a bunch of people to get killed over a 50-mile stretch of water in Iran, that doesn't sound so well. So what they'll try to do is say, oh, we don't want them to have nukes, or they're a danger to somebody else, or something like that, right? So the American Civil War was no different. There's protectionism tariffs that were being levied against the South from the North, and what it was is called, like, we're talking like 1828, which is the Tariff of Abominations. The subject the South was basically becoming subject directly to the North, and then they would build roads and everything like that with those tariffs, but they wouldn't build them going to the South. So the South was largely cut out of the equation, but they were having to pay for everything. And let's see, the nullification crisis of 1831 and 1832 got particularly spicy. A lot of people thought the war would break out then, because at the time, President Andrew Jackson, he came in and he was threatening to use military force to collect these tariffs, which were upwards of 50%. And the tariffs were preventing import of things abroad because the South wasn't buying from the North. So that took two different civilizations. You have the North industrial, and you have the agrarian of the South, and they weren't buying and selling from each other very much. And that naturally brought up tensions and things like that. So President Andrew Jackson, the $20 bill man, he threatens to use military force. At this time, John C. Calhoun, he is like spreading the word about how free market capitalism is the way to go. And he was basing everything on Marbury versus Madison, which shows that this anything that is repugnant to the Constitution was null and void. But the federal government didn't want to follow that. Andrew Jackson is famous for saying the court has made their decision, let them enforce it. Okay. He wasn't going to obey the court no matter what. Abraham Lincoln was not much different at all. The struggle between the federal and state authority culminated in the Tariff of Compromise, and that was negotiated by Henry Clay. I believe that was 1833. That got the tariffs from 50%, and it just slowly started to walk down. But here comes federal power grabs again, and in 1861, you had what's called the Morrill Tariff, okay? And that took those wheedling down tariffs and put them way back up to where the South was again paying unbelievable sums of money and getting almost nothing for it. Now, if we move on to other wars in history, we have other examples of Thucydides' trap being proven right again and again and again. You have the 30 Years' War in Spain, where they needed to maintain their trade routes and silver mines and things like that. But as most of us remember, the 30 Years' War was fought over Protestantism versus Catholicism. But the fact is that all these European powers, they were economic competitors, but when they were united under one church, they couldn't go to war with each other as easily. So when the Lutheran split happened and you have all of a sudden you have Protestants versus the Catholics, they're like, oh, that's a great way to sell it. We can go to war with this and we can, just protect our trade routes and go with the economy, right? Now, Genghis Khan, some people think I'm joking when I laugh and say that he was the greatest libertarian of all times. He was trying to open up trade routes with all of his neighbors. And the only reason he ended up killing enough people to cool the earth by 2 degrees, as it's said, is because they killed his caravan, right? So he was like, okay, maybe it was a cultural misunderstanding. So he sends another caravan. He sends even more furs, silks, all that. He sends, this time he sends 2 of his delegation, and he sends a Muslim translator. They kill the Muslim translator again. Well, they kill the Muslim translator, and then instead of killing his men this time, they shave their beards and send them back to Mongolia, which in Mongolian culture, your beard is kind of your status, So he humiliated. So only then did Genghis Khan go to war and wipe an entire civilization from the map, right? Now, Japan, this is going on to World War II. Japan, they were invading Manchuria, which obviously wasn't that great of a good thing, right? But they were also competing with the Chinese. Now, our soft power abroad, we had tariffs and sanctions put on Japan, and it cut off 94% of their oil overnight. They could no longer really do anything. So they had 2 options: use the oil they had to seize everything around the Pacific Ocean that they could very quickly, which is what led to Pearl Harbor. And honestly, they probably would have been fine if they hadn't tried to wipe out the Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor. But I'm trying to paint a picture for you how, it's just always about economics. It's always because somebody needed money, and then they find another reason to sell it, because we need money isn't going to get people to get out of their house and go fight for their country. Now, my favorite section of history, the Punic Wars. Carthage and Rome, they were bitter rivals. The outset of the Third Punic War, you had Cato the older, Cato the Elder. He would end every Senate speech in the world that he ever gave with Carthago delende est, right? Carthage must be destroyed. And one day he goes to Carthage and he brings back 3 huge figs. And by the time he gets back to Rome, they're even ripe and ready to eat, delicious. And he says, because of this economic power that they have in farming, they will eventually become a problem for us again. Carthago delende est. And eventually, Rome found their excuse to go to war with Carthage and wipe them from civilization. Julius Caesar used to brag that he could find 100 men willing to enlist in the military and risk death before he found even one that was willing to live in poverty and servitude. We live in turbulent times. Not only are we spiraling through the early stages of civil unrest that eventually erupt into civil war, but we are also seeing near perfect conditions that guarantee a global war. None of the major nuclear countries is in a position to back down. Russia can't back down from Ukraine. If they lose that warm water port in Sevastopol, their economy collapses. China needs Taiwan to make it through the next 100 years because of rare earth minerals and things like that, as well as control the South China Sea trade lanes. And we need Cuba here in the United States to control everything that goes on in the Gulf of what's now called the Gulf of America. Iran is no different because of a 50-mile stretch of water called the Gulf of the Strait of Hormuz. We are now seeing almost World War III starting over this. If the United States backs down in Iran, the petrodollar system is gone, international sanctions are gone, SWIFT payment system is gone, and OPEC is probably just going to evaporate into the wind. If China gives up on Taiwan, their economy will eventually collapse from the strain of 1 billion people on the South China Sea lanes, rare earth mineral supply, and the coming age of AI, which is going to be the biggest thing in the world. As I've already said, Russia, if they give up on Sevastopol, their economy collapses. That's why he seized Crimea to begin with in 2014. So that brings us to how they sell the wars they need. They sell them through propaganda, manipulating the social energies of the people, at least to have them in a numb reluctance to fight, as Rothbard outlines in Anatomy of the State. Through this propaganda, we see the winner of every war recording their propaganda as history. History is a set of lies agreed upon, as Napoleon Bonaparte used to tell us, right? And from this false, distorted history, we get foundational myths like Lincoln freed the slaves. I encourage everybody that's watching this to please go read the Emancipation Proclamation and realize that Lincoln really didn't free any slaves at all. He didn't care about them one bit. Slavery is evil. We can all say that. It should never be allowed. It is a wicked abomination. It is a lamentable evil, to quote Patrick Henry. But they found their propaganda line in the thing for slavery. Aristotle tells us that the guardians of a king is his subjects, and those of a tyrant are foreigners. Lincoln, 25% of his forces when he was invading the South came from immigrants fresh off the boat. They signed 2 pieces of paper, one giving them citizenship and one putting them into the army. And that was the way that they were ushered into the country. I genuinely believe that they would have eventually, I believe in the summer of '63, that the Union probably would have collapsed if they didn't have all these immigrants flowing in that were just willing to just shoot at whoever they told them to shoot at, right? Now, the 48ers, they were failed revolutionaries that came from Germany, and they supported the Republicans in their rigged elections. Those were basically proto-Marxists, even though Marx really wasn't that big of a deal just then, If you look at the elections that Lincoln held, especially the one with where West Virginia seceded from Virginia, you can see almost North Korea levels of voter turnout and voting approval, right? So what it was is even just the town of Sutton, where the Bigfoot Museum and the Mothman Museum was, you see that in their history, 10,000 Union soldiers were just in that tiny town. And if you've ever been to Sutton, it's one street and there's like 10 buildings. So if they put 10,000 soldiers just in Sutton, just imagine what was in Bluefield and everywhere else, right? So the vote passed with near North Korea level approval rating of 95% in secession from West Virginia, the secession of West Virginia from Virginia. 19,189 votes were cast, and only 781 were a no vote. And that is with an abysmal 30% voter turnout. Okay. It was a North Korea style election. The reason Lincoln moved into West Virginia as strongly as he did is because of West Virginia coal. Again, we're rooting this back to economics and Thucydides' trap, right? So you have the coal mines in West Virginia, which everything was steam powered back then, everything needed coal. Everybody heated their houses with coal. If they didn't have West Virginian coal, the northern economy, the industrial northern economy, would have collapsed. And that's why you had such strong military occupation there. And even still, it was just a border state. It wasn't declared for the North or the South. It was part of the Mason-Dixie setup, right? There are too many economic points to list in just a short segment. Now, I just wanted to quickly go through that, and of course, there will be sources on the edited version as well. But all right, Dixie, you're on the floor, brother. Go ahead.
All right. Great. Well, yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here to speak with you all this afternoon. Had an exciting day. Just actually filled out my application for the Sons of Confederate Veterans this morning, which
Wow, right on.
yeah, very much encourage anyone listening. If you think you have Confederate ancestor, if you know you do, get out there, put an application in. I put it off for a shamefully long time, but it's something that it's important to do, especially now.
Mhm.
But yeah, with that said, yeah, my name is Zach. A lot of you guys know me as Dixie Cavalier on X, also known as Jeb Stewart's Ghost. Uh, as you mentioned, I'm a proud native Virginian. I was born and raised here in the Old Dominion. I graduated from George Mason University, studied government international politics there, and had a focus on the philosophy of government. Really, I describe myself as a Jeffersonian through and through when it comes to my political ideology. I have deep family roots, go all the way back to Jamestown. Very, very proud of that. Um, and what really kind of got me started into the whole, taking care of the cemeteries, going out and honoring our ancestors' graves, and trying to protect the monuments and stuff was what's been commonly known as the American Kristallnacht, 2020, where all the statues started coming down, being vandalized, gravestones torn up, uh, just complete and utter disrespect for our Southern heritage, for our ancestors and their way of life. And I just couldn't countenance them, bashing them and making it seem like they were evil folks when, everything from how I was raised, all the stuff I've learned, and, it's just completely counter to that. So anyways, yeah, I signed up and joined the Jeb Stewart Camp 1343. We're getting ready for Memorial Day services at Huguenot Springs Cemetery. While I was there this morning, we actually looked at some ground penetrating radar and learned that they have there's about 150 soldiers there that are buried that have been previously not known. We got 2 new headstones installed there.
Mm.
So yeah, really happy about that. But kind of for my introductory segment here, I thought I would focus a little bit on one aspect of the Southern tradition that I see a lot of value in, and something I think has been lost in modern society. Um, and I guess to kind of illustrate it, I'll go into a little bit of my my lineage. So as you mentioned in the intro, um, one of my descendants is my fifth great grandfather, John Champ Carter, and he's
Mhm.
from the Carters, the first family of Virginia, the Carters of Shirley Plantation, of Blenheim, Robert King Carter, all those guys. And he was the son, he was the grandson of Robert King Carter. He was a Revolutionary War officer, and he was an ensign in the Seventh Virginia, later a captain in the First Continental Artillery, and he was wounded at the Battle of Waxhaw and taken prisoner by the British and spent 3 years in captivity. He came from a very illustrious, wealthy family, but when he came back from the war, he was in bad shape. 3 years in captivity will do that to you. There's sources saying that he had gambling problems. What's clear is he wasn't very handling his money very well. And so his father, Edward Carter of Blenheim, actually took it upon himself to make sure that the inheritance went uh, not directly to my fifth great grandfather, Jonathan Carter, embarrassingly enough, but he did make sure that it got passed down to my fourth great grandfather, uh, William Fauntleroy Carter, and
Mhm.
his wife and grandchildren, my descendants, which is actually a really good thing because um, you know it enabled them to continue the family line, and his grandchildren did go on to do quite great things. William Fauntleroy Carter is first cousin of Robert E. Lee, so by extension, I'm a first cousin of Robert E. Lee,
That's awesome.
at 5 generations removed. Um, and then a little bit further down the line, this is where we get into the Confederate history, which I'm extremely proud of. My great great grandfather Caswell Turpin, he married Willie H. Carter, who is the granddaughter of William Fauntleroy Carter. So that connection would have not been made without the close family, extended family connections of people looking out for each other. And I think that really speaks to the parallel non-governmental support structures of the Old South, uh, and the viewpoints, the different viewpoints between the Cavalier mindset of the South and a more unitary state, central government with a lot of government control in your life. In the South and the Southern tradition, there were lots of support structures within the community, and it started with the extended family. Also included the church. They called it the parish back then, the parish vestry, civic organizations, fraternal organizations, unorganized militia. I mean, really, most of the counties in Virginia back then had unorganized militias, and they elected their own officers. So men in the community had a chance to get out and take the measure of each other, right? To see, is this guy a good character? Is this somebody I'd want to lead me in war? And there was a lot of fellowship, fraternity. They got together. There was lots of drinking at the musters, and that sort of stuff. But it really did serve a practical purpose in helping the community support each other without getting the government involved, which I think is a common theme of the Southern tradition. So I just wanted to tell that story as one illustration. I'm happy to go into any other areas, but that's kind of what I wanted to open.
All right. Which one of you guys would like to go next? Got CSA Appreciator. Nate, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How bad am I lagging?
Oh, no, you're not. You're not lagging at all. Looks
Alright.
good.
Um, well, like like you said, I'm CSA Appreciator. My name is Nate S. I'm from Arkansas. I'm currently going to school in Colorado for electrical engineering. Um, so my parents are both Southerners, but they're also very anti-South. In fact, in fact, if you want to ask do they know if this, if about my account or whatever, the answer is no. Do they know if I'm going on a podcast today? The answer is no. Um, but so I had the full Yankee experience. I'm going to a, going to public school, going to having them echo the narrative at home. So naturally, I believed it. And so back in 2024, yeah, 2024, very early 2024. I was scrolling through YouTube one night, and I saw just popping up on my timeline was Dixie, which and the video that prefaced it by saying the unofficial anthem of the Confederacy. Now, at that time, I actually had to steel myself to say, okay, I'm gonna listen to this very bad racist song. So, and I listened to it, and I liked the song. So I went on to Spotify and I found a song, and I found a version by the Weavers, and that kind of became my, whenever I was feeling particularly angry, right? Whenever I was feeling particularly hateful or something, I would play that song, just like, well, it's a song I hate, whatever. But but I started to become, more and more warm to it, and Spotify being Spotify, started recommending more and more, Confederate songs. And I liked every single one of them, so I made a playlist, and in fact, the playlist actually still exists today. Um, but so I made a playlist, and I started adding the songs onto the playlist. And so I just I didn't even know it at the time. I was slowly warming to the South.
Mhm.
Now, um, going back to 2017, 2018, about, I had created pro-Trump Twitter accounts, and I had gotten to 6,000 on one and 7,000 on another, and they were both banned. So I
Mhm.
decided I'm not going to go back. But then Elon Musk took over Twitter, and then I decided to go back in July, and in late July 2024. And so I made an account, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna make this a pretty big account. This is gonna be a pro Trump account. And if you actually go back to my very first tweets, like my very, very, very first ones, they're all just pro Trump.
Mhm.
And um, I decided to put pro South in
Mhm.
my bio because why not? I had been warming up to
Mhm.
it anyways, and I mean, I was from the South and all that. So
Mhm.
my first follower was a bot, was a one of those sex bots. But my second
Mhm.
one was actually New Jersey flaggers.
Uh,
Uh, th- they took a chance on puny one follower me, and they're only following like 700 people. They have 4,000 followers. They took a chance on me, and
Mhm.
I was amazed. So I started really actually becoming serious about this.
Mhm.
And, as they say in the Dr. Seuss book, the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day, source the Confederacy. And but then I started looking into it and I'm like, okay, well, you know what, maybe I can just pretend because I know it's still wrong. But I started looking into it and no, it's not wrong. The Union lied about everything.
Mhm.
And I started winning arguments against seasoned historians, against historians with degrees on Twitter, and it just became a positive feedback loop. And at
Mhm.
the beginning, whenever someone was starting to make a good point, I would run to my followers and ask, "Hey, can you help me? I don't know what to say here." Now, many of those same people run to me when because if I can say anything on myself, I'm a quick learner. So,
Mhm.
and it's just been up and up from there.
Mhm.
And I yeah, I mean, I'm still living with my parents. I still don't have like a single Confederate flag at home because they won't let me have one. I don't have basically anything. This year, I basically got online using my own card,
Right on.
but that's it. So, but but as what should I call you? Appalachian Liberty?
Appalachian, but yeah, I'll throw an apple at you if you say Appalachian.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay. But
Appalachian.
yeah,
Appalachian.
my name's Travis. Y'all could just say Travis.
All right.
I'm pretty much out and proud about it. Like the thing is like when I came up and started realizing that Lincoln and all his propaganda was false, like what it was is my mom, she's really into genealogy, and she pointed out that one of our ancestors fought for the South. And I was like, wait, we never owned slaves. Like we're too poor. Like we none of my ancestors owned a single slave, right? So I was like, okay, so maybe there's more to this. Let's read into it. So my ancestor, Leonard Dryman, he got his left arm blown off at Jackson, Mississippi, and he got left in a swamp to be like basically slowly consumed by bloat flies, right? And then he is finally found by some more physicians and they take him into the hospital, but then the battle lines change and he ends up like getting captured by the Union as they take control of that hospital. And one of the doctors comes in and just pours turpentine on his arm, and he said it about near made me crazy. So then he ends up healing up a little bit and he escapes with the help of the Union doctor, believe it or not. The doctor gives him a bottle of brandy and then they slowly make it across the picket line and then get back to the Confederate side. And my ancestor, my fifth great grandfather, he ends up dying of fever before he even gets back home. But like the guy he helped escape made it back home and told his story. Dr. Njoya, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to be in this discussion. It's such a great thing to do on the day that commemorates the secession of Virginia. So I just want to pick up for my segment. I want to pick up on the theme that I think all of you have touched on, and that's the idea of the propaganda that is told about the South. So maybe I came at it from a different perspective, because I never had a time when I thought this propaganda was true, because I didn't have to go through this propaganda in school. I think that's what makes a lot of people believe it, because if that's what you're taught at school, if that's the history you're taught at school, you'd have no reason to doubt it. And I actually think that's quite healthy in a way. You don't expect, at least when we were at school, those of us of a certain age, you don't expect children to just be doubting everything the teachers are saying. They're there to learn, and there's a kind of natural assumption that what you're being told is true. So I think that explains why a lot of people grew up being fed a lot of this propaganda. So by contrast, by the time I heard all these propagandistic stories about the South, I already knew that the people telling these stories are liars. So I would have had no reason to believe them. I'm just drawing that contrast because I think when you're at school, your default is to believe what the teacher is telling you. Whereas by the time I heard all these stories, I already knew what was true, and I already knew that these people telling these stories are liars. So how did I know that they were liars? It's because they tell the same types of propaganda. At the beginning, Travis, you talked about the propaganda of war. And I like that you gave examples of many different wars, because it's the same type of propaganda for all these wars. And all of it has one goal, which is to justify power and to justify control. And once you've heard the propaganda for one particular war, you start to recognize the pattern. So I think that's how I recognize the pattern of the stories being told about the South as being obviously untrue. And just to give you an example, I was coming at this from England, from the UK, where they tell the same stories about the British Empire. So they say the British Empire is founded on slavery. The British colonizers went everywhere, and there were just these evil people who were raping and pillaging and never did anything good. They tell all these things that I knew were not true. I knew they were not true because I grew up in Kenya, which was a former British colony. So I knew that what I was being told was not true. And that's even without necessarily, I'm not a historian by background. I think, as you said in the introduction, my academic background is in law, but I already knew that what they were saying was not true. So that's how I really got into this, was in trying to counter that propaganda, trying to argue against the destruction of historic monuments. People say all these monuments are there to show white supremacy and racism, and they've destroyed monuments. It's not just in the American South, but across Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They are everywhere, these Marxists. So that's really how I got into this, was trying to counter the destruction of Confederate monuments. And then one thing you find people trying to do, the destroyers, is to tell lies about the people whose monuments they're destroying. It's not that they care about them. It's an excuse to destroy them. So like, oh, we're going to destroy this monument because this person was a slaver. And so that's how I got into reading about all these people that they're trying to destroy, so that you can just counter them and tell them that's not true. And speaking of propaganda, I also wanted to mention John C. Calhoun, because really, I think that explains a lot of the things that Calhoun said about slavery. He was trying to counter the propaganda. This was in a time when New England, Massachusetts in particular, Charles Sumner being the leader, was just telling lies, basically, about slavery in the South. And a lot of what Calhoun said should be seen in that context. I think sometimes people give the impression that Calhoun just, I don't know, he just loved slavery. And so he just decided he was going to go and start defending it. That wasn't what happened. He was trying to tell the propagandists that what they were saying was not true. Just to give an example, Charles Sumner, he said that slaves were brutalized and that they were nothing more than heaving masses of flesh. And Calhoun said, no, that's not true. In fact, that's when he started talking about Christianity, preaching Christianity to slaves, education, comparing their condition to the condition of slaves in the condition of Black people in Africa. So now people look back at Calhoun and say, oh, he was just trying to say how amazing slavery is. No, he was trying to say that the lies people were telling about the old South were not true. So I was really happy to hear Dixie telling about the Old South, the bonds of family in the Old South. I think that's such an important theme that comes out of the Old South that we don't hear much of these days because of all the propaganda about it. And that's, I think, one of the most powerful stories that should be told about the South. And I think those bonds are still very strong today. And I think that's what we were hearing about. So maybe just one last thing I might mention is the role of the abolitionists in spreading propaganda. Now, if you're an abolitionist, people think by definition you're a good person because, it's like being an anti-racist or being an anti-fascist. These are good things to be, right? So people assume that they have good intentions. And that's not the case with the abolitionists who were basically fomenting revolution in the South. They did not have good intentions. They had political intentions to destroy what they saw as the inordinate power of the South. I think by then, by 1860, the South was greatly outnumbered by the North. And I think a lot of people in the North thought, why should we have equal power with the southern states? We outnumber them. We're more important than them. We're the industrialized people. They're the agrarians. They should, they're the backwater. Why should we have equal power with them? In fact, why should they have any power? And I think the abolitionists were in that vein, trying to spread propaganda and to foment revolution. They would send pamphlets to the South telling slaves, rise up and kill your masters because they're terrible people. So their intentions were not good. And I think it's really important to question that, just as we question all the propaganda that goes around about the South. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to cover for my segment.
Well, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much for being here because it's hard to find people who are brave enough to even talk about it, and it just comes down to like, do you believe your ancestors were evil, or do you just strictly believe everything the government tells you? Because just what the government told us 6 months ago is already being proven wrong. That they can't tell the truth. They just won't in under almost any circumstance. So, like, let's see. You mentioned, okay, yeah, I think you touched on this a little bit, but like how New England was angry about the Louisiana Purchase and they didn't want to be ruled by Virginia. I think you mentioned that in one of your previous talks. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it's really important for people to go back into history to understand why the North and South were feuding.
Mhm.
And to understand why, in particular, Massachusetts and South Carolina were feuding, because I think these two states were the face of this feud that goes back in history. In fact, some people say it goes back even before they arrived in America. It goes back, some people say it goes back even to the English Civil War. So I think that's just a really important context. So that the point about the Louisiana Purchase, at a time when everybody thought of the South as America, everybody thought of Southerners as the real Americans. The New Englanders were the radicals that were against everything. The Southerners were the conservatives, and the New Englanders were against the Louisiana Purchase. They were against the War of 1812. They were against free trade. They were against everything that the South was proposing. And more importantly, they were threatening to secede over it. They were constantly threatening to secede. So when John C. Calhoun went to law school in New England, his professors in New England at Yale, they were trying to persuade him that secession is a great idea when there's conflict between the sections. If you're not happy with what the other section is doing, you should secede. It was Calhoun who was objecting to that. He was the unionist, and he was the one saying, if you have a dispute between brothers, you talk about it, you sort it out, you rely on the Constitution to resolve your dispute. You don't just secede. So people say, oh, the South, they were the ones that wanted to secede. In fact, at the time, it was the opposite. There was nobody at the time saying secession is illegal, secession is unconstitutional. On the contrary, Connecticut and Massachusetts were the ones frequently saying that they're going to secede if they're not happy with what the South is doing. So I think that's just a really important historical context in understanding this feud.
Yeah, I think if you look at like what Robert E. Lee said, he was against secession, but he was going to stick with whatever Virginia did because he believed Virginia was his country and that it was just a member of the United States. Now, one thing I've seen you post about quite a lot is the Lion of Atlanta. I haven't been able to look up what that is. Can you tell us more about that?
Wow, the Lion of Atlanta. Thanks for just giving me a heads up about that because it's one that I really want to keep in the public eye. So when I first started defending Confederate memorials, I didn't have a specific memorial in mind. I was just trying to say defend all the Confederate memorials. I think I wrote an article about it at the time that you can find on the Mises website, and it's called The Battle of the Confederate Monuments. So I didn't have a specific monument in mind. But when I started writing about it on X, people started to talk to me about specific monuments that are important to them in their hometown, in their home city. And that's how I came to learn about the Lion of Atlanta and all the other monuments that I've spoken about on X, because each of those is important to the people who live there, if I can put it that way. It's they're not just monuments, it's personal. It's personal to people. And so the Lion of Atlanta is personal to the people of Atlanta, the people of Georgia, because it was a monument that they raised money for to serve as the gravestone for the unknown Confederate dead. And the reason why they are unknown is because they were never buried when they fell, most of them in the Battle of Atlanta. And they were not buried when they fell because of just the chaos of war. And at the time, it was absolute chaos. So a lot of them just lay where they fell. And it was 2 years after the war, in 1867, that the women of Atlanta said, we want to bury them. We don't know who they are. Their families couldn't even come and claim them. They said, we don't know who they are, but we want to bury them. So there are 3,000. And I think there were also some that were soldiers that had died of their wounds, died in hospital. 3,000 that were buried in a sort of mass grave with no names. Their names known only to God. And the Lion of Atlanta is modeled on a lion from, I think, Switzerland that's guarding, it's a dying lion. So it's a lion depicted in its death throes, and it's a lion saying, with my last breath, I'm going to stand guard. So it's very evocative and very important to the people who raised it. And it stood there in the graveyard in a cemetery for over 100 years, about 130 years. And now it's been removed by the city of Atlanta, and they won't say where it is. And for a long time, when I was writing about this, because I've posted about it a lot on X, and I always would say, where's the Lion of Atlanta? Why are you hiding it? Give it back. Why don't they give it back to the United Daughters of the Confederacy? Isn't that the honorable thing to do if you don't want your memorial? Anyway, so they took it and hid it somewhere. And I've always been saying, where's the Lion of Atlanta? And just a couple of days ago, I think it was on X, somebody said that the reason they keep it hidden is because they pretty much destroyed it. They don't want to give it back because if people see the condition it's in, they'll be shocked. It was mostly destroyed during the BLM riots. You know, they'd go in there with, I don't know what they had, some kind of sledgehammer, and just basically attacking it. And it's in such a condition now that it would break people's hearts if they would see it. It's grave desecration. And I think one question we should ask is why people are not angry. People should be angry about this.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that with I think it's a side effect of their propaganda is that they've convinced us to forget our history or just never taught it to us at all. Because if you think about what you're taught in history class in school, you get maybe 6 weeks worth of the Civil War, then you get 6 weeks worth of World War II, and then you might get maybe a few smattering events like Vietnam or whatever. But if we realize that one, our ancestors were not evil, they were just fighting for their freedom, and if we realize two that our leaders will always lie to us, we can then use that as a platform to just slowly find the truth, you know? Because even I was extremely pro Lincoln until somebody pointed out that a lot of what, he did and said was for political reasons only. A lot of people don't realize that he was inherited 4 slaves through Mary Todd because women couldn't own property at the time, and slaves unfortunately were seen as property. And instead of freeing them, he sold them, and because he wanted the money, and he didn't care to emancipate them. So those who say he dug his fingernails into his fist and said, "I will abolish everything," that's really just, unfortunately, propaganda. Honest Abe was not very honest at all. In fact, his knee-jerk reaction, I believe you pointed out in one of your talks, either that or was Professor De Lorenzo, he said that once the Supreme Court ruled against Lincoln, he immediately drafted a letter of arrest and sent it after the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And it's crazy. So this is more of a question to everyone. They've spent years tearing down our noble ancestors' monuments. They don't realize that all blades cut twice because power is a two-edged sword, right? Uh, do you think it would be reasonable to remove Lincoln from Mount Rushmore? Or do you think it would, because he has his own monument in Washington as well. It's the size of it's bigger than many buildings in the United States. Do you think we should remove that one in revenge for our thing? Or do you think we should play the bigger person and be like, just give us the Lion of Atlanta back? And that's to everyone.
I'll start with that. I mean, I don't know what y'all think, but to me, I think on principle that would be wrong. I think that would be us stooping down to their level and doing what they're doing out of spite. And I don't think I can combine that. And I mean, to me, I think what they're doing is sort of a subterfuge in a way. It's not really about, because Dr. Njoya, as you were saying, that lion had been there for hundreds of years, right? It wasn't hurting anything, right? and them removing it didn't appreciably improve anything. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that they're actually trying to do here? I mean, they're using the monuments and these things as, I think as a tool to just take apart our society so they can level things out to implement their race Marxist ideas. And I don't think that they could come straight at us with those ideas and have them accepted. So by taking something moral, like, that's generally accepted throughout society, the Confederates were evil, they can push that and push that and push that and tear down our heritage and then eventually replace it and with what they want to implement. But I'd be very curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that too. But yeah, I didn't mean to sup on the other answers either. So
oh no, you're good. Go for it. Anyone else thinking?
Yeah.
What you got?
So, while I think in principle it's a good idea, the problem I think I have with that particular notion is that it's Mount Rushmore. So one of the big complaints that we Southerners levy against Yankees is that they come down to our territory and destroy our stuff. Now, South Dakota is not the South, right? Even though it has South in the name, it's not the South. It's very much the North. If they want to honor Lincoln in the North, I say let them. Lincoln and Sherman statues in the South, however, I think those are fair game. Especially if they're replacing, if they're gonna like be replacing our old monuments that were there, I think it's very fair to them. But Washington D.C., South Dakota, those that's I mean that's their territory. One of the great things about the South is that it doesn't tell other people how to live. Unlike of course many people in the North. So I would say no to that. I would say no I would say yes on the premise, but no on the actual specifics of your question.
It kind of gets back to local control in a way, right? Like that you don't want it to be something where it's a national dictate of these monuments to go. Leave it up to the people who live around there where it means something to them. Don't know where somebody else's neck of the woods is and start telling them how they want to live, because that ain't going to float.
I agree completely. I'm glad you guys answered that way. How about you, Dr. Njoya?
I agree with what everyone has said, and I just want to add that Stone Mountain is under threat. And I think that before we even worry about what's happening at Mount Rushmore, we should rally behind the people trying to defend Stone Mountain, because it has been in the sights of the destroyers since the summer of George Floyd. They were openly saying that they're going to dynamite it because they said it's a racist mountain. And now they are trying to put up, some kind of placards. They want to say, here stands a racist mountain. You know why they do that? This is exactly how they targeted the Lion of Atlanta. They chip away at it and until it's in a condition where they can say, oh, look how destroyed it is. We better dynamite it for its own protection. So I think it's really important for people to be protective of the monuments of the South. And I think that Stone Mountain is of particular importance. I mean, all the memorials are important, but I think that Stone Mountain has particular significance for the South. And I should just add that the sons of Confederate veterans are in court right now trying to protect it. And I just hope that everyone will support them.
Yeah, that's absolutely the correct answer. Like, I've never been to Stone Mountain. I really should go at some point. I know Zach said he's going to be there here in a couple of days, right? Is that what you told me?
No, I'm not going to be down that. I'm in Virginia, so I'm about 8 hours away from down there.
Oh, okay, my bad. Yeah, I have a very tiny brain, so I'm trying to shove as much into it as I can. But uh, let's see. So, like, one thing that while Dr. Njoya was talking there is that it made me think of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Like, there's round the clock guard, there's the changing of the guard, which is a massive ceremony. If we ended up removing the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which I believe was World War One, if memory serves, like, it would be the almost the exact same as what happened to the Lion of Atlanta, you know? And that's one of the most sacred monuments in our entire country. Like, we don't know who that guy was, but we know he died serving us, you know? And that's why it's so important. So, like, you know, it just stuns me that they would wanna delete something like that, you know?
Well, I think that kind of gets back to what I was saying is that it points to them having a them using this as a subterfuge. There's an aim beyond, oh, we this false assertion. Oh, we want to just correct history. It's a history debate. You know, it's not about it's not about history at all. It's about them attacking us now and putting their ideas in place of what has made this country great, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah, I think what made this country great is, like, one thing I'll do is I'll even go back to, like, King James, where he was trying to put the aristocracy in check in England, and he was pretty successful in that, but, like, almost at the same time, you see the colony in Virginia opening up, and you see what's called the House of Burgesses forming, which is like the early proto-government of the United States, and I think that was 1618 if memory off the top of my head, but anyway,
Yeah.
they move over here for the chance of freedom from the crown, you know, because, like, even then they seen, like, you know, it rankles to be told everything that you can do all the time, you know, just the outright just tyranny of it all, and then what, maybe lasts 50 years when we finally get our own country, and then, you know, you have you know, you have the federal government marching in and, like, killing mass civilians, you know? So, like, so Dixie, like, your overall persona is Jeb Stuart. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you picked him?
Oh, yeah, sure, and I'd be happy to do that. Well, my great great grandfather, who I joined the SCV, you know, via his auspices or however you want to say it, he was in the Second Virginia Cavalry, and I really am fascinated by the Cavalier um, mindset, culture, if you will, of early Virginia, and I see Jeb Stuart as sort of one of the last Cavaliers, if you will. You know, he sort of had that, uh, you know, the knight errant, I think, you know, is what they called him in history. You know, he embraced all the trappings of being a Cavalier. You know, you know, the mannerisms and just the heritage and all the things attached to it. But he was a highly effective, you know, military commander, the eyes and ears of the Army of Northern Virginia. But more than that, I just think his personality represents something that I kind of would like to strive to be more like, which is in line with you know, the the traditions of old Virginia. I mean, you know, he very much was.
Yeah, like, that's one thing I like to tell people about history is that it's once you start studying these people and how awesome they were, once you realize that your ancestors had badassery flowing in their veins, that you start to be affected by that. Like, my ancient ancestors, Robert de Volibus, he helped William the Bastard at the time, not William the Conqueror because he became that later, but William the Bastard came over from Normandy
See,
and
Northern blood in you, huh?
oh yeah, yeah, I got the Norman in me, man. Like, so he came over and he helped found current day England, you know, and then, of course, William the Conqueror was not a good king at all. Like, you know, but you know, my ancestors didn't know that at the time. So he becomes a baron, the first Baron Wells, and then during the War of the Roses, the seventh and eighth Baron Wells, they were executed on the orders of Edward the Fourth. And it was just it's crazy because, like, you know, you just realize that these men throughout thousands of years all fought for freedom, and some of them lost their heads like my ancestors did, But, then, they finally get sick of it and it's like, "F this, I'm out," and they come here to America, and tyranny follows them in another form,
Well, that is the blending of they called it in England at the time, and Dr. Njoya, I'm sure you would know a lot more about this than me. They called it the Norman yoke, right? They thought that the Normans had come over there and sort of put the Anglo-Saxons under the yoke of them, but I think what it actually turned out to be was one of the best combinations in history. Maybe, I mean, you can combine the Anglo-Saxon, frontier, the Scottish, the Highlands, the Scots Irish, with the more noble Cavalier, Norman blood, and that's what really powered a lot of the families in the South. Right, it was that frontier um, culture combined with the more aristocratic culture of the Tidewater area, which formed a really unique heritage that powered the South despite all of its um, resource insufficiency, manpower insufficiency. They held out for 4 years when they had hardly any right to last more than a couple months, and I think it does go back to that.
Now, you've also mentioned that, I think it was First Manassas was your favorite battle, or was it second? I forget, like
I like Second Manassas in particular, just because of all of how outnumbered um, Stonewall Jackson was. They had to kick Banks out of Northern Virginia, and Robert E. Lee was already being pressured, and him in the face of a much larger army sending off Stonewall Jackson. I think he had 5,800 men. Uh,
Mhm.
they defeated much more than that, and he I forget exactly how many miles he had to drive his men, but just the strategic brilliance of that battle, how he in detail defeated three different armies. That's still studied by military tacticians today.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that was one of the great ones. The first battle of First Manassas, you know, the armies were so green that it was more like
Mm.
I think more like a riot than a proper
Mhm. That's
formalized
true.
battle. But my second great grandfather did get shot in the leg at First Manassas, so
Oh, right on.
I got a little bit of uh, like it for that reason. But yeah, second Manassas I think is a really really good one. Gave it really uh, lifted the spirits of the South, and there in 1862.
Yeah, I was, like, going through, like, a documentary of Chancellorsville, and I'm perfectly convinced that Robert E. Lee was the second greatest military commander in human history, not just US history. Of course, I'm a major fan of Hannibal Barca and the Punic Wars because he just walks into Rome and sits on their couch for 13 years, and they can't do anything about it, So that's why I consider him the greatest, but, now, let's see, Nate, as Gen Z, like, do you see that they have any reason to not flip the table of in the current system? Because, like, I'm really refreshed looking at younger people because a lot of you guys aren't buying it, like, you realize that we're being dealt a terrible hand. Can you think of any reason for Gen Z not to flip the table on what we've got going on?
Like, what do you mean by flip the table?
Like to kind of abolish the current government type system and maybe just like I don't want to talk about like a hard revolution because like the last thing we need in this country is a civil war. Uh, we don't need to be slaughtering each other because like even if the supply chains alone collapse, we're probably talking about 200 million dead, and that's just not an option in my opinion. But like how do you see Gen Z affecting the future? Let's phrase the question that way.
Well, I think that I think first of all that we are headed for a silver lining. Gen Z, um, by far and by large, is anti foreign lobbying, anti data center, anti anti government corruption, and I think that the way that they're going to change government is by simply getting themselves elected. Because
That's awesome.
yeah, because like when they're elected, um, then we're gonna see more people like James Fishback or Tucker Carlson or Thomas Massey, uh,
Mhm.
these all have dictator level support in the youth, and
Mhm.
it's like it's like we're gonna have like maybe Fishback is like the rough sketch. We're gonna have improvements and improvements and improvements, and eventually, we're going to have different options that you can select.
Mhm.
All of them, great, right? And the best one will win. So I
Mhm.
think we are headed for a silver lining. I think that right now we just have to kind of get the boomers out of government, because the boomers, I mean, they were great in their own time, and then now they're not great in this time. And
Mhm.
I think once we do that, we will be able to the government will be uh well, not overthrown, but will be reformed.
Mhm. That's great. Yeah, because like I'm really hoping that there's a peaceful solution to this, because if you just go in and look at the detail of like how these battles happened, like my ancestor, my fifth great grandfather had his left arm blown off, and he was just left there to die slowly in a swamp, because they took the hospital that he was laying in, and then they just moved the hospital and left him laying on a blanket in the middle of the swamp. And a swamp is a dangerous place, even if you're perfectly well, let alone if you have your arm blown off or something like that. Now, let's see. I've already got that one. I'm going through a checklist here because I was trying to come up with questions and questions and questions, right? So, now, Dr. Njoya, you've mentioned in your talks in the past about how uh, capitalism defeats racism. Can you tell us more about that?
I think I would say the best way to understand that is as a response rather than as an argument that I was trying to make. It was
Mhm.
a response
Mhm.
to the people who say we need the government to fix racism. You need government interventions, you need government protection, because if you don't have that, or it's all going to be terrible. One of the things that people tell me a lot when I defend freedom, I defend the South, I defend the Confederate cause. One of the things people like to tell me is, you shouldn't say that, because if it weren't for all these laws, like civil rights laws, you would be in the field picking cotton as we speak. So people have this idea that if you didn't have government interventions, I don't know, the whole world would go crazy. And that's not true. The world is not kept running by the government. The world is kept running by people. The government is meant to be our servant. It's not our kind of oxygen that keeps us alive and keeps us breathing. So when I said capitalism defeats racism, I was trying to push back at those types of people. So I'm against the civil rights laws, all of them. I'm against the Civil Rights Act of 1866. I'm against the Civil Rights Act of 1871, the Civil Rights Act of 1864, and all the little ones in between. And so one of the things that people say is, oh, you need those because if you didn't have them, there'd be all this racism. And so my message is really racism is not defeated by the government. It's just defeated by voluntary exchange.
Mhm.
Capitalism is voluntary exchange. And on this point, I think the best reading, if anybody wants to look this up, is Walter E. Williams' Race and Economics. It's a great book because he talks about the Old South. So, the Old South, and maybe this links back to something that Dixie was saying earlier about the Virginia Cavaliers and the Virginia aristocracy. The Old South was not an egalitarian society, like where, nobody believed that people ought to be equal, but it also was not a racially segregated society like you
Mhm.
found in the North. It was a hierarchical society. So you had all these hierarchies, these status distinctions. At the time you had slaves, you had slave owners, you had farmers, you had people working on other people's farms. So you had all these status distinctions, but you didn't have like racial segregation, trying to keep people apart. And this is the context Walter Williams talks about Black people that owned property, Black people that owned their own businesses, Black people that became really quite wealthy in the society at the time. There were even free Blacks who owned slaves. So in 1860, just on the eve of the war, Black slave owners owned about 10,000 Black slaves. So we're talking, and there was no kind of law to protect, I don't know, anti-racism or whatever you want to call it. And often, may I just add, when people say racism, what are they talking about? Nonsense. You can't even get them to pin down what they're even talking about. So saying that capitalism defeats racism, my point was, you don't need government interventions. You need liberty. You need free people because that's what capitalism is. It's free exchange and private property ownership. So you need laws to protect private property. You need laws to protect freedom of contract, freedom of association. And that is what helps people to thrive. And Walter Williams, he's got all the evidence for people who need evidence. And I mean, empirical evidence. He's got it all in the book. And the message that he writes in the book, he says, the free market has always been a friend to Blacks, just as the free market, I mean, it's a market. It doesn't care what race people are. And so that's really the message of his book. And I think the takeaway is that you don't need all these laws, what I call racecraft, all these laws that are trying to, to protect people. And one other thing that I should add to this point about protecting minority races, in Georgia, we were just talking about the Lion of Atlanta. In Atlanta, white people are an ethnic minority. So, and nobody says, oh, we need laws to protect white people in Atlanta. In Georgia, white people are now 48%. That's a minority, but we never hear people saying we need laws to protect white people in Georgia. So they don't believe their own rhetoric, because if they believed it, that's what they would be saying. They'd be saying, how do we protect white people in Georgia, which they never do. In fact, oddly enough, they still call them white supremacists, even as they destroy their memorials. So it just shows these people are full of propaganda and hot air anyway. So the defense of free markets and capitalism is in that context.
Yeah. It's when I first started this, a quote that hit me like a thunderbolt. It was by Patrick Henry. He said, "Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it except for downright force. And when you give up that force, you are inevitably ruined." And that's why I started the whole Appalachian Liberty thing, because like I am for gun rights for literally everybody. The only way to maintain a status of liberty and freedom and peace for everyone is that everybody is armed. The reason the show is named The Great Object is because of another Patrick Henry quote. He said, "The militia is our only safety. We can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed." And I believe that to the core of my being, to the marrow of my bones. It doesn't matter if you're black, purple, whatever. I don't care. Like, everybody needs to be armed. Like, I don't know if you guys know who Maj Touré is. Walk up to him with a pair of chains and say, "You're my slave now," and see what happens. Like, he's the ultimate gun guy, And he's gonna be like, "No, I'm not." You know what I mean?
I would say that, I agree with you 100%, but I think a prerequisite for everybody being armed is that we have a high trust society.
Yeah.
And without
That would be nice.
things aren't going to work out. But I don't think we can get there with getting back to what Dr. Njoya was saying. This selective government. We're going to get in here and fix these white racist problems. And I think that there's an implication when they, Dr. Njoya, I don't know if you feel this or not, but when they say that to you, like, without these laws, without the government, you wouldn't have X, you wouldn't have Z. It's like, they are implying, I think Bush said it, it's the soft bigotry of low expectations, right? Like, oh, if you need our help, or else you wouldn't get there. And it's like, you realize what you're saying to this person, right? You're telling them you can't do it without us, without the government. Like, you need us to save you. And that, to me, that's more racist than anything. And yeah, that's just my take on it.
Exactly. The point you're making about high trust society is really important because, if you say everyone should be armed, well, some of those are criminals. So,
well, my take is more that the criminals are going to find a way to be armed no matter what, and because they don't care about laws. People like all of us here do care about laws. We care about order. We care about peace and liberty. And I don't think there's anything to be gained by disarming people like us while we got MS-13 and gangsters out there. And I think that like if you go back to Lieutenant Jeff Cooper, he said that the criminal they do not fear the judge or the jury or the executioner. What they must be taught to fear is their intended victim. I'm paraphrasing him. I know I butchered that, but like if good people like back during the Wild West era, you had a saying. It said, "God didn't make every man equal, but Samuel Colt did." And I believe that mentality alone creates a high trust society. Like up here in Appalachia, hopefully you guys get to visit sometime. It is a high trust society because everybody knows that if I go try to hurt this little old lady, that little old lady's got a 410 judge in her pocket and she's just gonna empty it on me, And I think a lot of that comes down to does the criminal fear their victim? And up here in Appalachia, the answer is yes. And that's why you see us having a much lower crime rate than anywhere else in the country. Now, a violent crime rate. Let me add that caveat because like there's still drugs and everything like everywhere else, but violent crime rate here in Appalachia is like 1 in 755, whereas like in other places, like let's say the inner city, you've got like 1 in 10 who's been assaulted at some point,
And David Hackett Fisher actually wrote about that, the difference in violence in the North and the South, and how when violence does occur in the South, it's usually something to do with respect, like somebody felt disrespected or something. It's a personal matter. Whereas in the North, it's typically, somebody's robbing at the store, or maybe they're mugging somebody on the street. Whereas in the South, it's more like, feuds, if you will, or somebody did something to your wife, or somebody did something to one of your children, or tried to rob your grandma, whatever it may be. But I think that's a worthwhile distinction to make too, regarding violence in the North versus the South.
Like, I guess I could move on to like the Reconstruction era, like as far as like what happened after the war. The amnesty trap was one thing that like Confederate veterans fell into as they came back. President Andrew Johnson, he offered amnesty, but radical Republicans rejected it and ignored his orders, often demanding near impossible levels of proof of loyalty. Like they wanted like an oath of loyalty to the Union, right? People would lose their property if they didn't sign that oath, And then there's the Confiscation Acts, which was driven by the Freedmen's Bureau. Many Confederate veterans returned home to find that their property and homes had been confiscated by either technicalities or abandonment law or forfeited land based on signs like crops hadn't been planted or weeds not trimmed, things like that. Like, which of course they were all fighting in the war, so they couldn't do that, Then there's the Reconstruction Acts. Now, I know that General Grant and General Lee, they really respected each other. He had the Reconstruction Acts. Most Confederate veterans were barred from running from office. They couldn't even vote in most cases. Coupled with the crushing property taxes of the Reconstruction Act, they lost their entire, they lost everything while they were off at war and they didn't even know it, And if they couldn't pay the property taxes, they had their property fully confiscated then, right? And then this forced farmers into what's called the crop lien system. The ones that did manage to keep their property, they had to often finance the next year's harvest against this year's harvest with the major northern banks. And because of crazy interest rates, a lot of them lost their property as well, just because they produced 80,000 bushels instead of 100,000 or whatever, you know? And it was like systematic taking everybody's property because they wanted to punish the South. They didn't want to just, they didn't just want to establish equity again. They wanted to actually be like, okay, these people are evil. We're going to destroy everything that they love, and we're going to do it systematically. And a lot of this, it forced Confederate veterans to go into a life of crime, right? And one of the big things I like to point to with this is the James gang, the James Younger gang, right? So Jesse James, when his older brother Frank went off to war, he was at his home one time, and then Lincoln moves into Missouri very quickly at the beginning of the war with occupation troops. The occupation troops come to the James family farm. They whip Jesse James bloody. They hang his stepfather to the point where he loses consciousness. He became brain dead from that. And this is before the war had even really begun, right? Frank James was off with Quantrill's Raiders, which is probably deserves their own episode, but he was also under Bloody Bill Anderson as well, right? Well, Jesse obviously learns that the Union coming in with them not even doing anything wrong, he's getting beat bloody to where he can't even stand up. His father's brain dead now. His mother and sister get taken off to a prison camp. You start to see that like this is the tyranny that they were living under, and this is what they were fighting against. Like almost nobody owned slaves. Like I think it was like a total 6% of the South owned slaves at its peak. And then like if you look at like how when they came back home and they realized that everything was taken from them, they couldn't own property or anything like that. Jesse then like he hunts down his father's killer, kills him, and enlists in the Confederate Army. Right after the war, even through the Amnesty Acts, guerrilla soldiers weren't allowed to own property. They weren't allowed to even become citizens again. And they all ended up just kind of getting shoved into a life of crime. Like Jesse James, he never had a chance. He never had a chance to live a normal life like all of us do. And he ended up getting forced into this. So this leads to the daylight robbery because like he wanted to embarrass the Union after the war, right? So he like his gang did a daylight robbery of Liberty, and they took $60,000 with them, right? And I've got a letter here from Jesse James, and I'm just going to open it up to general discussion after that. But like, I just feel like this entire letter kind of deserves to be read, right? So Jesse wrote this letter in September of 1872, right? A great deal has been said in regard to the robbery which occurred at the Kansas City Exposition Grounds. I will give a few lines to the public as I am one of the party who perpetuated the deed. So he's admitting to the robbery, right? A great many say that we, the robbers, deserve hanging. What have we done to be hung for? Is it true that I shot a little girl, though it was not intentional, and I am very sorry that the child was shot, and if the parents will give me their address, though the columns of the Kansas City Weekly Times, I will send them money to pay her doctor's bill, and as Mr. Wallace, I never tried to kill him. I only shot to make him let go of my friend. If I had been so disposed, I could have shot him dead. Just let the party of men commit a bold robbery and then cry, hang them. But President Ulysses S. Grant and his party can steal millions, and that is all right. Some editors call us thieves. We are not thieves. We are bold robbers. It hurt me very much to be called a thief. I've never stolen anything in my life. It makes me feel like they were trying to put me on par with Grant and his party. We are bold robbers, and I am proud of the name. For Alexander the Great was a bold robber, Julius Caesar was a bold robber, Napoleon Bonaparte was a bold robber, and Sir William Wallace, not old Ben Wallace, and Robert Emmet, all bold robbers. Please rank me with these. and not with the Grantites. Grant's party has no respect for anyone. They rob the poor and rich, and we rob the rich to give to the poor. I will close by saying Horace Greeley should defeat Grant, and then I can maybe make an honest living and will not have to rob, as taxes will not be so heavy. So, like, extremely political nature of, like, the James Gang's activities after the war, you know? And I just feel like that speaks to the just overall violence of Reconstruction and how brutal it was for everyone, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Reconstruction was a deliberate, vindictive attempt to destroy Southern civilization. So I think it's natural that men like Jesse James would fight back against that. They were purposely setting out to destroy the heritage, the culture, the social structure of the South. And so naturally, you're going to have men who step outside of the law and take things into their own hands. What I see about Reconstruction really is just the ruggedness, the determination of the Southern people to kind of endure through it. I was reading Thomas Nelson Page's book on the Old Dominion, and he has a passage where he talks about how 10 years after the war ended, the people in the South were more impoverished than at the end of the actual war. As a result of Reconstruction. So that letter makes a lot of sense to me in that context, that people would be forced into those situations. And that's just what happens when you have the tyrannical boot on your neck.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and that kind of reminds me of the first clan, the first Ku Klux Klan. That was this was created by Nathan Bedford and a few others after the war, and they were a vigilante group. What was happening is that um that black people in particular, as long as they could prove that they voted Republican, then they could just basically get away with anything, which is what they were doing. They were, doing all these things. And so the Klan was, if, say, a black person were to rob a store and the store owner were to call the police, the union police wouldn't do anything because, well, that black person votes the right way. So that's where the Klan would come in. And this is why they were portrayed as racist, but they were not racist. The first Klan was not racist. They literally had black people among their ranks, and they also lynched white carpetbaggers along with black people. It's just that, again, because the black people were the ones that were getting away with everything, they were mainly the ones that they targeted. But it kind of feeds into what you were saying, Travis, where when these people, they had nothing. They were forced into these vigilantes group. They were forced to have this life of crime. The South really became like Upper East Side Chicago or inner city Baltimore, where people are just, they're forced to go into crime because they don't have anything else, and it's pretty sad. And a lot of the rural South has still not recovered from the war. I mean, if you want to go back to before the Civil War, what was the wealthiest state? It wasn't New York. It wasn't Pennsylvania. It was Mississippi. It was the wealthiest state. It was one of the most powerful states in the Union. And look at it today. It's very sad what's happening in Mississippi and the rest of the South, but particularly Mississippi. It just, yeah.
But
Yeah, it's sad.
there was an inheritance that would have presumably gotten down to me, but after the war, a lot of that money that had been built up from back in the early 1600s through all those big plantations and farms and passed down, it got wiped out. So I know for a fact that that's how it happened.
Dr. Njoya?
I wanted to comment on the spirit of rebellion from the letter that you read. To me, that's the most important message that I take from it. Not the stuff about robbing, but that spirit of defiance and of defiance and of rebellion, and saying and that lack of apologizing, it really, to me, it really evoked the song that you played at the beginning. I'm a good old rebel. You know, the language there is so defiant and so
Yeah.
unapologetic and so unreconstructed. And I think that is so inspirational.
Yeah.
I think that is actually why people are inspired by the black flag. I don't think it's so much because of their bank heists, although it's like watching a movie when you read the things they got up to.
Yes.
But I think that more important is that people really admire that sense of people saying, I won't, I don't ask any pardon for what I was and am. I think that
Yeah.
that is absolutely timeless and universal.
Yeah, I originally was gonna sing the version of by Holt Axton, and then I realized it was heavily edited, and it wasn't based on history. So I went back to the original by Major Ennis Randolph, and I had to change a few words to make it sing better, but I did my best. So I just felt like it was something people would sing in a camp, you know.
Yeah,
I was having
amazing.
fun along with it. I liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's fun. But, like, yeah, like, nobody's calling for a new civil war. That's the worst thing that could possibly happen, and honestly, I'm happy that we became a single nation again because, I mean, you can see I have the American flag on my hat, right? But, like, it's a matter of, like, our ancestors weren't evil, and they really were just trying to protect their way of life, and if people learned that, like, I don't think there would be any real issue between Confederate and Union type people today because it was a long time ago. Like I was talking to this this friend of mine at work, and I was like, he told me he was from Ohio, and I was like, oh, you're a Yankee, huh? Because it just comes out, and he's like, oh man, that was a really long time ago. I was like, I don't mean it as an insult. It comes out, and he was like, oh, okay, yeah. He's like, "Oh, you guys are serious?" I was like, "No, man, we're fine now." It's just
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we find some way to get back to a less centralized general government, and
yeah.
it's hard to see how that is going to happen now that you know
Mhm.
both parties, both mainstream parties, seem to have wholeheartedly adopted the once we get power, we're going to maximize it at the federal level as much as possible.
Yeah.
But I would, my dream is that we get back to some level of state sovereignty, the 10th Amendment,
Mhm.
that it rolls back the 14th Amendment, all those progressive amendments that really took away state sovereignty and led to
Mhm.
largely, in my opinion, it's become an ungovernable entity. The unistate, the
Mhm.
uniparty. I mean, it was never designed to be so centrally governed. We have
Mhm.
400 some people in the House of Representatives. That size of that body hasn't changed despite the population growth in all of these years.
Mhm.
Have one representative representing millions and millions of people. Easier for the lobbyists to get in there and buy them off. I mean, just all sorts of things that are adverse effects from the
Mhm.
centralization of power in the federal government, and that's to me a long-term
Mhm.
consequence from the Civil War Reconstruction that we're still dealing with.
Right. Yeah, like, if you go back to, like, just the Articles of Confederation before the Revolutionary War, well, during the Revolutionary War, it was like, our first president was actually John Hancock. A lot of people don't know that, not George Washington. He was our first under the Constitution, but John Hancock, he was a president under what's called the Articles of Confederation, and if you read that, it's not really a long read at all. What it is it's a formal contract of friendship between the states, which I think is the actual goal of the United States. Because, like, right now we got Tennessee and I think Kentucky. It might be Tennessee and Missouri. They're fighting over water rights right now, and that's something that people have notoriously went to war over in the past. We don't need to be slaughtering each other over water rights. We can sit down and just figure it out and talk about it, you know? And, like, as long as we're not economic competitors, I feel like we are on the right track, and we're not economic competitors in this country. In fact, we're very intermingled. We need each other desperately. The interstate system really helped with that. Like prior to the advent of the interstate system, I think that was under Eisenhower, if memory serves. But
Correct.
anyway, was it? Okay. So yeah, so like it took I think 67 days to cross the United States back then, but now it takes 3. So, just that alone, the interstate system servicing everywhere in the country, that alone I feel like disarms Thucydides' trap because like nobody wants to go to war against their neighbor if they can avoid it, unless you're a complete psychopath. But, like up here in the mountains, like everybody's heavily armed and it's the most peaceful place you can go. You can even forget to leave your doors locked sometimes, and that's America to me. We don't need to be fighting and killing each other. That's insane. Nobody in their right mind wants that. You know.
Um, if I can, I would like to leave us
Mhm.
with with the story of one particular general from the
Mhm.
Civil War that I have really taken to start idolizing. Even though I only learned about him a couple months ago, I've really taken to start idolizing him, and that is Benjamin Hardin Helm.
Mhm.
Now he was from Kentucky, married Emil Todd, I believe is her name, and
Mhm.
she was actually the half sister of Abraham Lincoln.
Mhm.
So, which made Abraham Lincoln Helm's half brother. Then, um, and because of this, Lincoln offered Helm the position of paymaster for the entire Union Army, which was a very prestigious position. It was basically the money guy. All the um, paymasters of the Union Army became very rich. They lived in basically the equivalent of padded offices, padded air conditioned offices. Obviously, they didn't have those back then, but they lived in the equivalent of that in Washington D.C. They were the elite. Um, and so Lincoln offered Helm this position. Helm turned that down. Helm instead went back to Kentucky and raised his own grassroots Confederate regiment. He decided to join the Confederacy, and they were well known. N- they fought in a lot of battles, and they were known for their valiance uh, and their cutthroatness. And and Helm was always there, at the forefront. He wasn't one to hang back and watch his men. He was always there at the forefront, and this would actually end up, um, costing him. He would end up giving the ultimate sacrifice to his country, um, at the hands of enemy musket fire in the Battle of Chickamauga.
Mhm.
Um, but the reason I bring him up is because we need more Benjamin Hardin Helms here. We need people, kind of going to what you were saying at the very beginning of the show, where you said the problem is people choose money over country. Um, Benjamin Hardin Helm was the polar opposite of that. We need people that choose that are given the opportunity to be elites, and instead choose to be civilians among the rest of us. This is what we need, and uh, this is why I think I'm really taking to idolizing Benjamin Hardin.
Mhm. That's very cool. So I guess in closing, like something I like to ask my guests for is homework because we're not just trying to talk, we're trying to actually make the world a better place. So what I usually ask my guests for is a physical task, like a workout or something, a mental task, like a book or something, a problem to solve or something like that, and a social task because we're mind, body, and society. People, in my opinion, are the most important thing. We gotta be reaching out, and building community. So that's what the social task is about. So, like, any of you guys want to go first on that, or?
Yeah, I reckon I'll go first again.
All right.
Yeah, so for my physical task, I came up with a couple, but I guess I'll mention two of them. Um,
Mhm.
visit a grave of an ancestor that you haven't met. Do some research on them. Get some background as much as you can before you go, and think about what you would say to them when you get there. What advice they would give to you. What their life was like, and what they would think of yours. Also, the other one I have is to take stock of your self-defense capabilities. Travis, I threw this in there, especially up your alley.
Appreciate it.
Both unarmed and armed. So do an honest assessment of, and take steps to improve. If you've never been in a fight, learn how to throw a punch. You never know if you're going to be in one, right? But take stock of your self-defense capabilities, and just, especially if you're a man, you got a family, be prepared not have to call the police. At the drop of the hat. So that's my physical task. Do you want me to just throw off the rest of them too, or
yeah, if you want, yeah, go ahead.
So for the mental task, I picked pick a branch, a line of your family tree, and then just trace it back as far as you can.
Okay.
That's something that I found really interesting.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
And then to commit to reading at least 5 books by the end of 2026.
Okay, I've already got there, but I'll do 5 more.
And then for the social task, I have found recently that there's a lot of folks in my extended family who don't have a lot of people around them. They're older, maybe their kids have moved off, an aunt, an uncle, or something like that. And so for my social task, I picked to find someone in your family who just doesn't have a lot of people around them, who's kind of by themselves, and just start reaching out every now and then. Just check them out. You can get a lot of wisdom from older family members, and I think they deserve our honor and respect, even if sometimes they get on our nerves. We should be reaching out and maintaining those close family bonds as much as possible.
That's awesome. Dr. Njoya, would you like?
So I merged all the 3 points that you raised into one. And so my message it concerns Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, because I think he covers all 3 areas that you wanted us to give people homework about. So on physical preparedness, physical exercise and working out, Strom Thurmond was really great on that. In fact, if you go on the Abbeville website, there's an article that gives his Strom Thurmond's workout routine and his diet, like what he ate, what he avoided, and all his kind of lifting weights and all that. So I think for your homework, go on the Abbeville website, look up the Strom Thurmond workout routine.
Okay.
I mean, he was just amazingly strong and fit. I think he actually fought with somebody once.
That's awesome.
Or more than once, and won his fight. Anyway, and also lived to be over 100 years old.
Oh wow, right on.
So I think he's if he tells you this is a good workout routine, I think you can trust that it's a good one. For the mental exercise, I think that he was one of the leaders. In fact, he was the presidential candidate for the Dixiecrats.
Right
That's the states' rights Democrats. And so I think that one thing that many people don't know, they don't know what was the political and philosophical platform of the Dixiecrats. People tend to know a lot about the Old South and the war, and then they know a lot about today when the whole South is Republican. And I think there's this missing chunk in between the two, which is the Dixiecrats. So people should go and read about Strom Thurmond, watch his videos and his interviews, and just try to grasp what that philosophical idea was, because I think it gives a nice bridge from the past to the present. And on the social aspect, what I like, again, I'm drawing from Strom Thurmond, and I think what was, to me, what I admired so much about his platform was that he saw the South as having unified interests. So he would talk about the governors of the South, and there was this, you would hear this voice coming from the South, not just from South Carolina or just from Georgia or just from Alabama or Louisiana, but the South united. And one of the things that I say a lot on Twitter is you're stronger together. I think people can sometimes tend to be too focused on their own little world. So I think as part of the social aspect of this, it would be really, for your homework, go and look into what he called, he liked to call it the small Southern group in Congress. Okay, it may have been small, but I think that when you put your voices together, they are more powerful. So Strom Thurmond is my answer to all three of the questions.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. I'm gonna go get his biography. I actually seen it in the library the other day. I was like, and now I'm gonna go back for it. All right, Nate, you want to go next?
Yeah.
All right.
So for my physical tasks, unfortunately, one of the stereotypes that Yankees have for Southerners is that we're fat and overweight.
Mhm.
And so my physical task is to defeat that stereotype, right? Become, I mean, how should I phrase this? So it's, become the person that the Yankees hate to include in the South because it defeats their narrative.
There you go.
And yeah, my mental task is to go get a new Pro South book and read it. It doesn't matter what it is. Go get a new Pro South book and read it because there are so many perspectives about Pro South. And unfortunately, what I've seen is a lot of people hyper focusing on one thing, and then they suddenly become less focused about the South and more focused about that one thing. So broaden your reach. Go get a random Pro South book and read it.
Okay.
And my social task is many of my followers, almost all of them live in the South, and probably by chance, a lot of them probably live quite close to each other. And they all agree that the South was right, and that is a new friendship waiting to happen. So go on your feed, go on your social media feed, whatever, right? Find close South people, find someone that lives near you, and go be their friend. Go strike up a relationship with them. We Southerners need to stick together, and what better way than to start new friendships? So
Join the SCV.
Yeah, join the SCV. Join the
There you go.
SCV. Go on social media. Yeah.
Right on. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. We're coming up on time here. Anything else you guys want to plug or anything like that? Like, go for it, and I'll go ahead and bring us out.
There's one thing. I have a new. I think I have a new blog post coming out on the Reckoning this weekend. It's pretty cool. It's about the hypocrisy of the anti-slavery people today. And I think it's coming out this weekend and publishing the next weekend. So make sure to watch for that.
I'll just plug, at the Abbeville Institute. I mean, they're an awesome resource. Also Reckoning, where your blog post is going to be, Nate. I've seen your other one on there, which I enjoyed a lot. Also, the Old World Show is one I've really been enjoying on X. Will Tanner puts him out, and he's had a lot of videos lately on Old Virginia, the Cavalier ethos, and he's working his way up to the Civil War. And that will eventually get to Reconstruction. They're very well done, very well researched. I've gotten a lot of good book recommendations from his sources and quotes and things. So yeah, check him out. I'll put that.
And I'm going to plug my article on Strom Thurmond, which is on the Abbeville website. Please go and read it. It's only short. It explains the states' rights platform. And while you're there at the Abbeville website, look up all the other great articles they have on Senator Thurmond. He is such a great insight into the South and the politics of the South.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely look forward to your article. That's going to be awesome. Belle, she said post the playlist, Nate, like your music playlist.
Yeah, I did that.
All right, sounds good. We got Nick saying hey.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for your time. And especially thanks to all my subscribers. You guys have helped me upgrade the podcast to 1080p. And I just want to give you guys a quick shout out. Bridget Morgan, 3 Stand for Truth, Hanover Boxer, Sage the Wise Guy, Tennessee Militant, Federal Farmer, Kenny P. We got Lauren Nan, Desert Ranger, Aptac USA, Snickers, Patriot Day, America Only, Skinny Kenny, and Rothgar Skidling Shield. Thank you guys so much for everything. Thank you for watching. Thanks to the panel. You guys have been amazing. I couldn't have asked for a better show. Like, I'm just tickled to death how this went. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Y'all have a good day and good weekend.
Bye. Thank you.